YouTube, hello, it's me from the Oblivion Gate at the end of episode 2. Wow, I bet you didn't expect to see me here. I forgot to record an intro for the book reading video, so this is the intro for that. What you're about to witness is me back in the Wayne Priory, right after meeting Jauffre when I read all the books on his bookshelf. I hope you guys enjoy this. It's a very long video of me just reading books, and they are slightly out of order. If I continue doing books in the future, I'll try to keep doing a series, then a series, and then a series as I find the books. Not like a series for its video, but you'll see. I have Baronzia 1 and 2, and then there's 3 other books on the shelf, and then Baronzia 3, and I'm not going to sort them into the proper order, so it's 1 through 3. But going forward, if I come to a bookshelf that has a full series on it with other books mixed in, I'll try to read the full series all together and then do the other random books scattered about. I hope that makes sense, and I hope you enjoy this. Biography of Queen Baronzia by Stern Gamboge, Imperial Scribe. Late in the Second Era, a girl child, Baronzia, was born to the rulers of the Kingdom of Mournhold, in what is now the Imperial Province of Morrowind. She was reared in all the luxury and security befitting a royal dark elven child until she reached 5 years of age. At that time, His Excellency, Tiber Septim I, the first Emperor of Tamriel, demanded that the decadent rulers of Morrowind yield to him and institute imperial reforms. Trusting to their vaunted magic, the Dark Elves impudently refused until Tiber Septim's army was on the borders. An armistice was hastily signed by the now eager Dunmer, but not before there were several battles, one of which laid waste to Mournhold, now called Almalexia. Little Princess Baronzia and her nurse were found among the wreckage. The Imperial General Symmachus, himself a dark elf, suggested to Tiber Septim that the child might someday be valuable, and she was therefore placed with a loyal supporter who had recently retired from the Imperial Army. Sven Advinson had been granted the title of Count upon his retirement. His fiefdom, Darkmoor, was a small town in central Skyrim. Count Sven and his wife reared the princess as their own daughter, seeing to it that she was educated appropriately, and more importantly, that the imperial virtues of obedience, discretion, loyalty, and piety were instilled in the child. In short, she was made fit to take her place as a member of the new ruling class of Morrowind. The girl Baronzia grew in beauty, grace, and intelligence. She was sweet-tempered, a joy to her adoptive parents and their 5 young sons, who loved her as their elder sister. Other than her appearance, she differed from young girls of her class only in that she had a strong empathy for the woods and fields, and was wont to escape her household duties to wander there at times. Baronzia was happy and content until her 16th year, when a wicked orphan stable boy, whom she had befriended out of pity, told her he had overheard a conversation between her guardian, Count Sven, and a Redguard visitor to sell her as a concubine in Rahad, as no Nord or Breton would marry her on account of her black skin, and no dark elf would have her because of her foreign upbringing. "Whatever shall I do?" the poor girl said, weeping and trembling, for she had been brought up in innocence, in trust, and it never occurred to her that her friend the stable boy would lie to her. The wicked boy, who was called Straw, said that she must run away if she valued her virtue, but that he would come with her as her protector. Sorrowfully, Baronzia agreed to this plan, and that very night she disguised herself as a boy, and the pair escaped to the nearby city of Whiterun. After a few days there, they managed to get jobs as guards for a disreputable merchant caravan. The caravan was heading east by side roads in a mendacious attempt to elude the lawful tolls charged on the imperial highways. Thus the pair eluded pursuit until they reached the city of Riften, where they ceased their travels for a time. They felt safe in Riften, close as it was to the Morrowind border, so that dark elves were enough of a common sight. Biography of Queen Berendzea, Volume 2, by Stern Gamboge, Imperial Scribe. The first volume of this series told the story of Berendzea's origin, heiress to the throne of Mournhold until her father rebelled against his excellency, Tiber Septim I, and brought ruin to the province of Morrowind. Thanks largely to the benevolence of the emperor, the child Berendzea was not destroyed with her parents, but reared by Count Sven of Darkmoor, a loyal imperial trustee. She grew up into a beautiful and pious child, trustful of her guardian's care. This trust, however, was exploited by a wicked orphan stable boy at Count Sven's estate, who with lies and fabrications tricked her into fleeing Darkmoor with him when she turned 16. After many adventures on the road, they settled in Riften, a Skyrim city near the Morrowind borders. The stable boy, Straw, was not altogether evil. He loved Berendzea in his own selfish fashion, and deception was the only way he could think of that would cement possession of her. She, of course, felt only friendship toward him, but he was hopeful that she would gradually change her mind. He wanted to buy a small farm and settle down into a comfortable marriage, but at the time his earnings were barely enough to feed and shelter them. After only a short time in Riften, Straw fell in with a bold, villainous Khajiit thief named Theris, who proposed that they rob the Imperial Commandant's house in the central part of the city. Theris said that he had a client, a traitor to the Empire, who would pay well for any information they could gather there. Berendzea happened to overhear this plan and was appalled. She stole away from their rooms and walked the streets of Riften in desperation, torn between her loyalty to the Empire and her love for her friends. In the end, loyalty to the Empire prevailed over personal friendship, and she approached the Commandant's house, revealed her true identity, and warned him of her friend's plan. The Commandant listened to her tale, praised her courage, and assured her that no harm would come to her. He was none other than General Symmachus, who had been scouring the countryside in search of her since her disappearance and had just arrived in Riften, hot in pursuit. He took her into his custody and informed her that, far from being sent away to be sold, she was to be reinstated as the Queen of Mournhold as soon as she turned 18. Until that time, she was to live with the Septim family in the newly built imperial city, where she would learn something of government and be presented at the imperial court. At the imperial city, Berendzea befriended the Emperor Tiber Septim during the middle years of his reign. Tiber's children, particularly his eldest son and heir Pelagius, came to love her as a sister. The ballads of the day praised her beauty, chastity, wit, and learning. On her 18th birthday, the entire imperial city turned out to watch her farewell procession preliminary to her return to her native land. Sorrowful as they were at her departure, all knew that she was ready for her glorious destiny as sovereign of the kingdom of Mournhold. Real Berendzea, Part 1, Anonymous. 500 years ago in Mournhold, city of gems, there lived a blind widow and her only child, a tall, strapping young man. He was a miner, as was his father before him, a common laborer in the mines of the Lord of Mournhold, for his ability in magicka was small. The work was honorable, but paid poorly. His mother made and sold comberry cakes at the city market to help eke out their living. They did well enough, she said. They had enough to fill their bellies. No one could wear more than one suit of clothing at a time, and the roof leaked only when it rained. But Symmachus would have liked more. He hoped for a lucky strike at the mines, which would garner him a large bonus. In his free hours, he enjoyed hoisting a mug of ale in the tavern with his friends and gambling with them at cards. He also drew the eyes and sighs of more than one pretty elven lass, although none held his interest for long. He was a typical young dark elf of peasant descent, remarkable only for his size. It was rumored that he had a bit of Nordic blood in him. In Symmachus' 30th year, there was great rejoicing in Mournhold. A girl child had been born to the lord and lady. A queen, the people sang, a queen is born to us. For among the people of Mournhold, the birth of an heiress is a sure sign of future peace and prosperity. When the time came round for the royal child's rite of naming, the mines were closed, and Symmachus dashed home to bathe and dressed in his best. "I'll rush straight home and tell you all about it," he promised his mother, who would not be able to attend. She had been ailing, and besides, there would be a great crush of people, as all Mournhold turned out to be part of the blessed event, and being blind, she would be unable to see anything anyway. "My son," she said, "afore you go, fetch me a priest or a healer, else I may pass from the mortal plane ere you return." Symmachus crossed to her pallet at once and noted anxiously that her forehead was very hot and her breathing shallow. He pried loose a slat of the wooden floor under which their small hoard of savings was kept. There wasn't nearly enough to pay a priest for healing. He would have to give what they had and owe the rest. Symmachus snatched up his cloak and hurried away. The streets were full of folk hurrying to the sacred grove, but the temples were locked and barred. "Closed for the ceremony," read all the signs. Symmachus elbowed his way through the mob and managed to overtake a brown-robed priest. "After the rite, brother," the priest said. "If you have gold, I shall gladly attend to your mother. My lord has bidden all clerics attend, and I, for one, have no wish to offend him." "My mother's desperately ill," Symmachus pled. "Surely my lord will not miss one lowly priest." "True, but the archcanon will," the priest said nervously, tearing his robe loose from Symmachus's desperate grip and vanishing into the crowd. Symmachus tried other priests and even a few mages, but with no better result. Armored guards marched through the street and pushed him aside with their lances, and Symmachus realized that the royal procession was approaching. As the carriage bearing the city's rulers drew abreast, Symmachus rushed out from the crowd and shouted, my lord, my mother's dying." "I forbid her to do so on this glorious night," the lord shouted, laughing and scattering coin into the throng. Symmachus was close enough to smell wine on the royal breath. On the other side of the carriage, his lady clutched the babe to her breast and stared slit-eyed at Symmachus, her nostrils flared in disdain. "Guards," she cried, "remove this oaf." Rough hands seized Symmachus. He was beaten and left dazed by the side of the road. Symmachus, head aching, followed in the wake of the crowd and witnessed the rite of naming from the top of a hill. He could see the brown-robed clerics and blue-robed mages gathered near the high-born folk far below. Baranzia. The name came dimly to Symmachus's ears as the high priest lifted the swaddled baby and proffered her to the twin moons on either side of the horizon. Joan rising, Jode setting. "Behold the lady Baranzia, born to the land of Mournhold. Grant her thy blessings and thy counsel, ye kind gods, that she may ever rule well over Mournhold, its kin and its weal, its kith and its ilk." Bless her, all the people intoned along with their lord and lady, hands upraised. Only Symmachus stood silent, head bowed, knowing in his heart that his dear mother was gone. And in silence he swore a mighty oath, that he should be his lord's bane, and in vengeance for his mother's needless death, the child Baranzia he should have for his own bride, and that his mother's grandchildren should be born to rule over Mournhold. After the ceremony, he watched impassively as the royal procession returned to the palace. He saw the priest to whom he'd first spoken. The man came gladly enough now and returned for the gold Symmachus had and a promise of more afterward. They found his mother dead. The priest sighed and tucked the pouch of gold coins away. "I'm sorry, brother. It's all right. You can forget the rest of the gold. There's aught I can do here." "Likely. Give me back my money," Symmachus snarled. "You've done nothing to earn it." He lifted his right arm threateningly. The priest backed away, about to utter a curse, but Symmachus struck him across the face before more than 3 words had left his mouth. He went down heavily, striking his head sharply on one of the stones that formed the fire pit. He died instantly. Symmachus snatched up the gold and fled the city. As he ran, he muttered one word over and over like a sorcerer's chant. "Baranzia," he said. "Baranzia. Baranzia." Baranzia stood on one of the balconies of the palace, staring down into the courtyard where soldiers milled, dazzling in their armor. Presently they formed into ordered ranks and cheered as her parents, the lord and lady, emerged from the palace, clad from head to toe in ebony armor, long purple-dyed fur cloaks flowing behind, splendidly caparisoned. Shining black horses were brought for them, and they mounted and rode to the courtyard gates and turned to salute her. "Baranzia," they cried. "Baranzia, our beloved, farewell!" The little girl blinked back tears and waved one hand bravely. Her favorite stuffed animal, a gray wolf cub she called Woofin, clutched to her breast with the other. She had never been parted from her parents before and had no idea what it meant, save that there was war in the west, and the name Tiber Septim was on everyone's lips, spoken in hate and dread. "Baranzia," the soldiers cried, lifting their lances and swords and bows. Then her dear parents turned and rode away, knights trailing in their wake until the courtyard was nearly emptied. Some time after came a day when Baranzia was shaken awake by her nurse, dressed hurriedly and borne from the palace. All she could remember of that dreadful time was seeing a huge shadow with burning eyes filling the sky. She was passed from hand to hand. Foreign soldiers appeared, disappeared, and sometimes reappeared. Her nurse vanished and was replaced by strangers, some more strange than others. There were days where it may have been weeks of travel. One morning she awoke to step out of the coach into a cold place with a large gray stone castle amid empty, endless gray-green hills covered patchily with gray-white snow. She clutched Woofin to her breast in both hands and stood blinking and shivering in the gray dawn, feeling very small and very dark in all this endless space, this endless gray-white space. She and Hannah, a brown-skinned, black-haired maid who had been traveling with her for several days, went inside the keep. A large gray-white woman with icy gray-golden hair was standing by a hearth in one of the rooms. She stared at Baranzia with dreadful, bright blue eyes. "She's very black, isn't she?" the woman remarked to Hannah. "I've never seen a dark elf before." "I don't know much about them myself, milady," Hannah said, "but this one's got red hair and a temper to match, I can tell you that. Take care, she bites, and worse." "I'll soon train her out of that," the other woman sniffed. "And what's that filthy thing she's got? Ugh!" The woman snatched Woofin away and threw him into the blazing hearth. Baranzia shrieked and would have flung herself after him, but was held back despite her attempts to bite and claw at her captors. Poor Woofin was reduced to a tiny heap of charred ash. Baranzia grew like a weed transplanted to a Sirum garden, a ward of Count Svin and his wife, the Lady Inga. Outwardly, that is, she thrived, but always there was a cold and empty place within. "I've raised her as my own daughter," Lady Inga was wont to sigh as she sat gossiping when neighboring ladies came to visit. "But she's a dark elf. What can you expect?" Baranzia was not meant to overhear these words. At least she thought she was not. Her hearing was keener than that of her Nordic hosts. Others, less desirable dark elven traits, evidently included pilfering, lying, and a little misplaced magic. Just a small fire spell here and a little levitation spell there, and as she grew older, a keen interest in boys and men who could provide very pleasant sensations, and to her astonishment, gifts as well. Inga disapproved of this last for reasons incomprehensible to Baranzia, so she was careful to keep it as secret as possible. "She's wonderful with the children," Inga added, referring to her 5 sons, all younger than Baranzia. "I don't think she'd ever let them come to harm." A tutor had been hired when Johnny was 6 and Baranzia 8, and they took their lessons together. She would have liked to train in arms as well, but the very idea scandalized Count Svin and Lady Inga. So Baranzia was given a small bow and allowed to play at target shooting with the boys. She watched them at arms practice when she could, sparred with them when no grown-up folk were about, and knew she was good as, or better than they. "She's very proud, though, isn't she?" one of the ladies would whisper to Inga, and Baranzia, pretending not to hear, would nod silently in agreement. She could not help but feel superior to the Count and his lady. There was something about them that provoked contempt. Afterward, she came to learn that Sven and Inga were distant cousins of Darkmoor Keep's last titled residents. She finally understood. They were poseurs, impostors, not rulers at all. At least they were not raised to rule. This thought made her strangely furious at them, a good clean hatred, quite detached from resentment. She came to see them as disgusting and repellent insects who could be despised but never feared. Once a month a courier came from the Emperor, bringing a small bag of gold for Sven and Inga and a large bag of dried mushrooms from Morrowind for Baranzia, her favorite treat. On these occasions she was always made to look presentable, or at least as presentable as a skinny dark elf could be made to look in Inga's eyes, before being summoned into the courier's presence for a brief interview. The same courier seldom came twice, but all of them looked her over in much the same way a farmer would look over a hog he is readying for market. In the spring of her 16th year, Baranzia thought the courier looked as if she were at last ready for market. Upon reflection, she decided she did not wish to be marketed. The stable boy, Straw, a big, muscular, blond lad, clumsy, gentle, affectionate, and rather simple, had been urging her to run off for some weeks now. Baranzia stole the bag of gold the courier had left, took the mushrooms from the storeroom, disguised herself as a boy in one of Johnny's old tunics and a pair of his cast-off breeches, and on one fine spring night she and Straw took the two best horses from the stable and rode hard through the night toward Whiterun, the nearest city of any importance and the place where Straw wanted to be. But Mournhold and Morrowind also lay eastward, and they drew Baranzia as a lodestone draws iron. In the morning, they abandoned the horses at Baranzia's insistence. She knew they would be missed and tracked down, and she hoped to throw off any pursuers. They continued on foot until late afternoon, keeping to side roads, and slept for several hours in an abandoned hut. They went on at dusk and came to Whiterun's city gates just before dawn. Baranzia had prepared a pass of sorts for Straw, a makeshift document stating an errand to a temple in the city for a local village lord. She herself glided over the wall with the help of a levitation spell. She had reasoned, correctly as it turned out, that by now the gate guards would have been alerted to keep an eye out for a young dark elven girl and a Nordic boy traveling together. On the other hand, unaccompanied country yokels like Straw were a common enough sight. Alone and with papers, it was unlikely that he would draw attention. Her simple plan went smoothly. She met Straw at the temple, which was not far from the gate. She had been to Whiterun on a few previous occasions. Straw, however, had never been more than a few miles from Sven's estate, which was his birthplace. Together, they made their way to a rundown inn in the poorer quarters of Whiterun. Gloved, cloaked, and hooded against the morning chill, Baranzia's dark skin and red eyes were not apparent, and no one paid any heed to them. They entered the inn separately. Straw paid the innkeeper for a single cubicle, an immense meal, and 2 jugs of ale. Baranzia sneaked in a few minutes later. They ate and drank together gleefully, rejoicing in their escape, and made love vigorously on the narrow cot. Afterward, they fell into an exhausted, dreamless sleep. They stayed for a week at Whiterun. Straw earned a bit of money running errands, and Baranzia burgled a few houses at night. She continued to dress as a boy. She cut her hair short and dyed her flame-red tresses jet black to further the disguise, and kept out of sight as much as possible. There were few dark elves in Whiterun. One day, Straw got them work as temporary guards for a merchant caravan traveling east. The one-armed sergeant looked her over dubiously. He chuckled. "Dark elf, ain't you? Like setting a wolf to guard the sheep, that is. Still, I need arms, and we ain't going near enough Mournholds so you can betray us to your folk. Our homegrown bandits would as fain cut your throat as mine." Sergeant turned to give Straw an appraising look, then he spun back abruptly toward Baranzia, whipping out his short sword. But she had her dagger out in the twinkling of an eye and was in a defensive stance. Straw drew his own knife and circled around to the man's rear. The sergeant dropped his blade and chuckled again. "Not bad, kids, not bad. How are ye with your bow, dark elf?" Baranzia demonstrated her prowess briefly. "Aye, not bad at all. You'll be keen-eyed by night, boy, and of hearing, tall times. Trusty dark elf makes as good a fighting man as any could ask for. I know I served under Symmachus' self before I lost this arm and got invalided out of the Emperor's army. We could betray them. I know folk who'd pay well, Straw said later as they bedded down for their last night at the ramshackle lodge. Or rob them ourselves. They're very rich, those merchants are, Barry. Baronzia laughed. Whatever would we do with so much money? And besides, we need their protection for traveling quite as much as they need ours. We could buy a little farm, you and me, Barry, and settle down all nice like. Peasant, Baronzia thought scornfully. Straw was a peasant and harbored nothing but peasant dreams. But all she said was, not here, Straw. We're too close to Darkmoor still. We'll have other chances farther east. The caravan went only as far east as Sungard. The Emperor Tiber Septim I had done much in the way of building relatively safe and regularly patrolled highways, but the tolls were steep, and this particular caravan kept to the side roads as much as possible to avoid them. This exposed them to the hazards of wayside robbers, both human and orcish, and roving brigand bands of various races. But such were the perils of trade and profit. They had 2 such encounters before reaching Sungard. An ambush which Baronzia's keen ears warned them of in plenty of time for them to circle about and surprise the lurkers, and a night attack by a mixed band of Khajiit, human, and wood elves. The latter were a skilled band, and even Baronzia did not hear them sneaking up in time to give much warning. This time the fighting was fierce. The attackers were driven off, but 2 of the caravan's other guards were slain. Straw got a nasty cut on his thigh before he and Baronzia managed to gash his Khajiit assailant's throat. Baronzia rather enjoyed the life. The garrulous sergeant had taken a liking to her, and she spent most of her evenings sitting around the campfire, listening to his tales of campaigning in Morrowind with Tiber Septim and General Symmachus. This Symmachus had been made general after Mournhold fell, the sergeant said. He's a fine soldier, boy, Symmachus is, but there is more in soldiery involved in that Morrowind business, if you take my meaning. But, well, you know all about that, I expect. No, I don't remember, Baronzia said, trying to sound nonchalant. I've lived most of my life in Skyrim. My mother married a Skyrim man. They're both dead, though. Tell me, what happened to the Lord and Lady of Mournhold? Sergeant shrugged. I ain't never heard. Dead, I expect. 'Twas a lot of fighting before the armistice got signed. Pretty quiet now. Maybe too quiet. Like a calm before a storm. Say, boy, you going back there? Maybe, Baronzia said. The truth was that she was drawn irresistibly to Morrowind and Mournhold, like a moth to a burning house. Straw sensed it and was unhappy about it. He was unhappy anyway, since they could not bed together, as she was supposed to be a boy. Baronzia rather missed it too, but not as much as Straw did, seemingly. Sergeant wanted them to sign on for the return trip, but gave them a bonus nonetheless when they turned the offer down, and parchments of recommendation. Straw wanted to settle down permanently near Sungard, but Baronzia insisted on continuing their travels east. I'm the Queen of Mournhold by rights, she said, unsure whether it was true, or was it just a daydream she had made up as a lost, bewildered child. I want to go home. I need to go home. That, at least, was true. After a few weeks, they managed to get places in another caravan heading east. By early winter, they were at Riften, and nearing the Morrowind border. But the weather had grown severe as the days passed, and they were told no merchant caravans would be setting forth till mid-spring. Baronzia stood on top of the city walls and stared across the deep gorge that separated Riften from the snow-cloud mountain wall guarding Morrowind beyond. Barry, Straw said gently, Mournhold's a long way off yet, nearly as far as we've come already. The lands between are wild, full of wolves and bandits and orcs and still worse creatures. We'll have to wait for spring. There's Silgrad Tower, Barry said, referring to the dark elven township that had grown up around an ancient minaret guarding the border between Skyrim and Morrowind. Bridge guards won't let me across, Barry. They're crack Imperial troops that can't be bribed. If you go alone. I won't try and stop you. What will you do? Silgrad Tower's full of Imperial soldiers. You become a washing woman for them, or a camp follower? No, Baronzia said slowly, thoughtfully. Actually, the idea was not entirely unappealing. She was sure she could earn a modest living by sleeping with the soldiers. She'd had a few adventures of that sort as they crossed Skyrim, when she dressed as a woman and slipped away from Straw. She'd only been looking for a bit of variety. Straw was sweet, but dull. She'd been startled, but extremely pleased when the men she picked up offered her money afterward. Straw had been unhappy about it, though, and would shout for a while, then sulk for days afterward if he caught her at it. He was quite jealous. He'd even threatened to leave her. Not that he ever did, or could. But the Imperial Guards were a tough and brutal lot, by all accounts, and Baronzia had heard some very ugly stories during their treks. The ugliest of them, by far, had come from the lips of ex-army veterans around the caravan campfire, and were proudly recounted. They'd been trying to shock her and Straw, she realized, but she also comprehended that there was some truth behind the wild tales. Straw hated that kind of dirty talk, and hated it more that she had to hear it. There was a part of him that was fascinated, nevertheless. Baronzia sensed this and had encouraged Straw to seek out other women. He said he didn't want anyone else but her. She told him candidly she didn't feel that way about him, but she did like him better than anyone else. "Why do you go with other men?" Straw had asked on one occasion. "I don't know." Straw sighed. "They say dark elven women are like that." Baronzia smiled and shrugged. "I don't know. Or no. Maybe I do." "Yes, I do know." She turned and kissed him affectionately. "I guess that's all the explanation there is." A Brief History of the Empire, Part 1, by Stronach Cathoge III, Imperial Historian. Before the rule of Tiber Septim, all Tamriel was in chaos. The poet Tacitus called that period of continuous unrest days and nights of blood and venom. The kings were a petty lot of grasping tyrants who fought Tiber's attempts to bring order to the land, but they were as disorganized as they were dissolute, and the strong hand of Septim brought peace forcibly to Tamriel. The year was 2E 896. The following year, the emperor declared the beginnings of a new era, thus beginning the Third Era, Year Ot. For 38 years, the Emperor Tiber reigned supreme. It was a lawful, pious, and glorious age, when justice was known to one and all, from serf to sovereign. On Tiber's death, it reigned for an entire fortnight, as if the land of Tamriel itself was weeping. The emperor's grandson, Pelagius, came to the throne. Though his reign was short, he was as strong and resolute as his father had been, and Tamriel could have enjoyed a continuation of the Golden Age. Alas, an unknown enemy of the Septim family hired that accursed organization of cutthroats, the Dark Brotherhood, to kill the Emperor Pelagius I as he knelt at prayer at the Temple of the One in the Imperial City. Pelagius I's reign lasted less than 3 years. Pelagius had no living children, so the crown imperial passed to his first cousin, the daughter of Tiber's brother Agnerith. Kintira, former queen of Silvanar, assumed the throne as Kintira I. Her reign was blessed with prosperity and good harvests, and she herself was an avid patroness of art, music, and dance. Kintira's son was crowned after her death, the first emperor of Tamriel to use the imperial name, Uriel. Uriel I was the great lawmaker of the Septim dynasty and a promoter of independent organizations and guilds. Under his kind but firm hand, the Fighters' Guild and the Mages' Guild increased in prominence throughout Tamriel. His son and successor, Uriel II, reigned for 18 years, from the death of Uriel I in Third Era 64 to Pelagius II's ascension in Third Era 82. Tragically, the rule of Uriel II was cursed with blights, plagues, and insurrections. The tenderness he inherited from his father did not serve Tamriel well, and little justice was done. Pelagius II inherited not only the throne from his father, but the debt from the latter's poor financial and judicial management. Pelagius dismissed all of the Elder Council, and allowed only those willing to pay great sums to resume their seats. He encouraged similar acts among his vassals, the kings of Tamriel, and by the end of his 17-year reign, Tamriel had returned to prosperity. His critics, however, have suggested that any advisor possessed of wisdom but not of gold had been summarily ousted by Pelagius. This may have led to some of the troubles his son, Antiochus, faced when he in turn became emperor. Antiochus was certainly one of the more flamboyant members of the usually austere Septim family. He had numerous mistresses and nearly as many wives, and was renowned for the grandeur of his dress and his high good humor. Unfortunately, his reign was rife with civil war, surpassing even that of his grandfather, Uriel II. The War of the Isle, in Third Era 110, 12 years after Antiochus assumed the throne, nearly took the province of Somerset Isle away from Tamriel. The united alliance of the kings of Somerset and Antiochus only managed to defeat King Orgum of the island kingdom of Paiandania due to a freak storm. Legend credits the Sigic order of the Isle of Artaeum with the sorcery behind the tempest. The story of Kintira II, heiress to her father Antiochus' throne, is certainly one of the saddest tales in imperial history. Her first cousin, Uriel, son of Queen Patima of Solitude, accused Kintira of being a bastard, alluding to the infamous decadence of the imperial city during her father's reign. When this accusation failed to stop her coronation, Uriel bought the support of several disgruntled kings of High Rock, Skyrim, and Morrowind, and with Queen Patima's assistance, he coordinated 3 attacks on the Septim Empire. The first attack occurred in the Iliac Bay region, which separates High Rock and Hammerfell. Kintira's entourage was massacred, and the Empress taken captive. For 2 years, Kintira II languished in an imperial prison, believed to be somewhere in Glenpoint or Glenmoril, before she was slain in her cell under mysterious circumstances. The second attack was on a series of imperial garrisons along the coastal Morrowind Islands. The Empress's consort, Contin Arinx, fell defending the forts. The third and final attack was the siege of the imperial city itself, occurring after the Elder Council had split up the army to attack western High Rock and eastern Morrowind. The weakened government had little defense against Uriel's determined aggression, and capitulated after only a fortnight of resistance. Uriel took the throne that same evening and proclaimed himself Uriel III, Emperor of Tamriel. The year was Third Era 121. Thus began the War of the Red Diamond, described in Volume 2 of this series. Biography of Queen Baranzia, Volume 3, by Stern Gambroge, Imperial Scribe. In the second volume of this series, it was told how Baranzia was kindly welcomed to the newly constructed imperial city by the Emperor Tiber Septim and his family, who treated her like a long-lost daughter during her almost 1-year stay. After several happy months there learning her duties as vassal queen under the empire, the imperial general Symmachus escorted her to Mournhold, where she took up her duties as queen of her people under his wise guidance. Gradually they came to love one another, and were married and crowned in a splendid ceremony at which the emperor himself officiated. After several hundred years of marriage, a son, Helseth, was born to the royal couple amid celebration and joyous prayer. Although it was not publicly known at the time, it was shortly before this blessed event that the Staff of Chaos had been stolen from its hiding place deep in the Mournhold mines by a clever, enigmatic bard known only as the Nightingale. 8 years after Helseth's birth, Baranzia bore a daughter, Morgia, named after Symmachus' mother, and the royal couple's joy seemed complete. Alas, shortly after that, relations with the Empire mysteriously deteriorated, leading to much civil unrest in Mournhold. After fruitless investigations and attempts at reconciliation, in despair, Baranzia took her young children and traveled to the imperial city herself to seek the ear of then-Emperor Uriel Septim VII. Symmachus remained in Mournhold to deal with the grumbling peasants and annoyed nobility, and do what he could to stave off an impending insurrection. During her audience with the Emperor, Baranzia, through her magical arts, came to realize to her horror and dismay that the so-called Emperor was an impostor, none other than the bard Nightingale, who had stolen the Staff of Chaos. Exercising great self-control, she concealed this realization from him. That evening, news came that Symmachus had fallen in battle with the revolting peasants of Mournhold, and that the kingdom had been taken over by the rebels. Baranzia at this point did not know where to seek help, or from whom. The gods, that fateful night, were evidently looking out for her. as if in redress of her loss. King Edwire of High Rock, an old friend of Uriel Septim and Symmachus, came by on a social call. He comforted her, pledged his friendship, and furthermore confirmed her suspicion that the Emperor was indeed a fraud, and none other than Jaeger Tharn, the Imperial Battle Mage and one of the Nightingale's many alter egos. Tharn had supposedly retired into seclusion from public work and installed his assistant, Rhea Silmain, in his stead. The hapless assistant was later put to death under mysterious circumstances. Supposedly a plot implicating her had been uncovered and she had been summarily executed. However, her ghost had appeared to Edwire in a dream and revealed to him that the true Emperor had been kidnapped by Tharn and imprisoned in an alternate dimension. Tharn had then used the Staff of Chaos to kill her when she attempted to warn the Elder Council of his nefarious plot. Together, Edwire and Baronzia plotted to gain the false Emperor's confidence. Meanwhile, another friend of Rhea's, known only as the Champion, who apparently possessed great, albeit then untapped potential, was incarcerated at the Imperial dungeons. However, she had access to his dreams, and she told him to bide his time until she could devise a plan that would effect his escape. Then he could begin on his mission to unmask the impostor. Baronzia continued to charm and eventually befriended the Ursat's Emperor. By contriving to read his secret diary, she learned that he had broken the Staff of Chaos into 8 pieces and hidden them in far-flung locations scattered across Tamriel. She managed to obtain a copy of the key to Rhea's friend's cell and bribed a guard to leave it there as if by accident. Their champion, whose name was unknown even to Baronzia and Edwire, made his escape through a shift gate Rhea had opened in an obscure corner of the Imperial dungeons using her already failing powers. The champion was free at last, and almost immediately went to work. It took Baronzia several more months to learn the hiding places of all 8 staff pieces, through snatches of overheard conversation and rare glances at Tharn's diary. Once she had the vital information, however, which she communicated to Rhea forthwith, who in turn passed it on to the champion, she and Edwire lost no time. They fled to Wayrest, his ancestral kingdom in the province of High Rock, where they managed to fend off the sporadic efforts of Tharn's henchmen to haul them back to the Imperial City, or at the very least obtain revenge. Tharn, whatever else might be said of him, was no one's fool, save perhaps Baronzia's, and he concentrated most of his efforts toward tracking down and destroying the champion. As all now know, the courageous, indefatigable, and forever nameless champion was successful in reuniting the 8 sundered pieces of the Staff of Chaos. With it, he destroyed Tharn and rescued the true Emperor, Uriel Septim VII. Following what has come to be known as the Restoration, a grand state memorial service was held for Symmachus at the Imperial City, befitting the man who had served the Septim dynasty for so long and so well. Baronzia and good King Edwire had come to care deeply for one another during their trials and adventures, and were married in the same year shortly after their flight from the Imperial City. Her 2 children from her previous marriage with Symmachus remained with her, and a regent was appointed to rule Mournhold in her absence. Up to the present time, Queen Baronzia has been in Wayrest with Prince Helseth and Princess Morgia. She plans to return to Mournhold after Edwire's death. Since he was already elderly when they wed, she knows that the event, alas, cannot be far off as the elves reckon time. Until then, she shares in the government of the Kingdom of Wayrest with her husband, and seems glad and content with her finally quiet and happily unremarkable life. On Morrowind, the Imperial Province, by Aramanwe of Sunhold. After the conquest of Hammerfell, Imperial legions amassed along the northeastern borders of Cyrodiil, and invasion fleets prepared in Skyrim. Initially, though, the Imperial legions and navy were widely considered undefeatable. House Indoril and the Temple Hierarchy proposed to resist to the death. Redoran and Dres stood by Indoril, with Telvanni remaining neutral. Hlaalu proposed accommodation. Contrived border incidents in Blackmarsh ended inconclusively, but the swampy terrain did not favor Legion and Navy coordination. Against the Legions massed west of Silgrad Tower and Kraganmore, and the Legions west of Blacklight and Cormaris View, Morrowind had pitifully small militias, stiffened by small companies of Redoran mercenaries and elite units of house nobles and temple ordinators and armigers. Further complicating matters was the refusal of Indoril, Dres, Hlaalu, and Telvanni to garrison the western borders. Indoril and Dress proposed, rather than defend the western border, instead to withdraw to the interior and fight a guerrilla war. With Halalu advocating accommodation and Telvanni remaining neutral, Redoran therefore faced the prospect of standing alone against the Empire. The situation changed radically when Vivek appeared in person in Vivek City to announce his negotiation of a treaty with Emperor Tiber Septim, reorganizing Morrowind as a province of the Empire, but guaranteeing all rights of faith and self-government. A shocked temple hierarchy, which apparently had not been consulted, greeted the announcement with awkward silence. Indoril swore they would resist to the death with the loyal support of Drez, while Redoran, grateful for a graceful excuse to avoid facing the legions unsupported, joined with Halalu in welcoming the agreement. Telvanni, seeing which way the wind blew, joined with Halalu and Redoran in supporting the treaty. Nothing is known of the circumstances of the personal meeting between Septim and Vivek, or where it took place, or the preliminaries which must have preceded the treaty. The public reason was to protect the identities of the agents involved. In the West, speculation is centered around the role of Zurin Arctis in brokering the agreement. In the East, rumors suggest that Vivek offered Numidium to aid in the conquest of the Altmer and Somerset Isle, in return for significant concessions to preserve self-rule, house traditions, and religious practices in Morrowind. The Lord High Counselor of the Grand Council, and Indoril, refused to accept the treaty and refused to step down. He was assassinated and replaced by Halalu. House Halalu took the opportunity to settle some old scores with House Indoril, and a number of local councils changed hands in bloody coups. More blood was shed in these inter-house struggles than against the Imperial legions during Morrowind's transition from an independent nation to a province of the Empire. The generals of the legions had dreaded an invasion of Morrowind. The Dunmer were widely regarded as the most dreadful and fanatic foes, further inspired by their temple and clan traditions. The generals had not grasped the political weaknesses of Morrowind, which Emperor Tiber Septim recognized and exploited. At the same time, given the tragic depopulation and destruction experienced by the other provinces, conquered by Septim, and the swift and efficient assimilation of Morrowind into the imperial legal systems and economy, with relatively small impact on lower or upper classes of Morrowind citizens, the tribunal also deserves some credit for recognizing the hopelessness of Morrowind's defense and the chance of gaining important concessions at the treaty table by being the first to offer peace. By contrast, many Indoril nobles chose to commit suicide rather than submit to the Empire, with the result that the house was significantly weakened during the period of transition, guaranteeing that they would lose much of their influence and power to House Halalu, whose influence and power was waxing with this enthusiastic accommodation with the Empire. The temple hierarchy more skillfully managed their loss of face, remaining aloof from political struggles and earning the goodwill of the people by concentrating on their economic, educational, and spiritual welfare. Manual of Spellcraft and Introductory Text. The Beginning Spellcaster. The most powerful mages in Tamriel were once beginners. They all had similar early experiences. Exposure to magic kindled an interest and/or unlocked some latent ability, followed by years of hard work. These intrepid souls honed their skills and learned new spells and vigorously trained their minds and bodies to become the formidable figures they were known as during their later lives. The Mages Guild of Tamriel has long been the first stop on a long road to knowledge and power for many individuals. Providing magical services to the general public, the Guild offers a wide variety of spells for purchase, and is recommended as a first stop for any aspiring spellcaster. Independent dealers may be found, though their selection of spells is often not as comprehensive as that of the Mages Guild. Many spells are beyond the capabilities of beginning mages. The ability to render oneself invisible, for example, is an advanced power and is beyond the novice spellcaster. Through practice, a mage may become more skilled in a given school of magic and find himself proficient enough to begin exploring its more powerful aspects. The fledgling mage should not be daunted by his inability to wield certain powers, but should instead use this as a point of focus and a drive for bettering himself. Rather than becoming discouraged, the student should look forward to higher levels of skill, such as the advanced techniques of absorbing spells, summoning lesser, and eventually greater, Daedra, and undead, for research purposes only, and protection against specific types of spells, such as fire, frost, and shock spells. Mages wishing to specialize in a particular school of magic are encouraged to learn as many spells as possible within that school, and to practice them frequently. All mages, whether specializing or nurturing a general interest, are encouraged to apply for membership within the Mages Guild. Beyond services available to the general public, the accomplished guild member has access to many exclusive services, such as advanced spellcraft and enchanting. These services have been deemed potentially dangerous to the public at large and have been restricted to higher-ranked guild members in good standing by the Council of Mages. Citizens interested in the further use of magic should consult their local Mages Guild Archmagister. Let me tell the tale of the Thief of Virtue. In the land of Hammerfell in the city of Such there lived a baron who was quite wealthy. He was a noted collector of rare coins. The Baroness, Veronique, found the whole thing quite tedious. However, she did appreciate the lifestyle that the Baron's wealth provided. Ravius Tyrannus was a noted thief. He claimed to be a master thief in the mythical Guild of Thieves. However, that was most likely just braggadocio. The only known thieves' guild was wiped out over 450 years ago. Ravius decided that the Baron should share his wealth. Specifically, he should share it with Ravius. The wily thief crept into the Baron's castle one night, intending to do just that. The walls of the castle were noted for their height and unscalability. Ravius cleverly used an arrow of penetration to affix a rope to the top of the battlements. Once on the battlements, he had to evade the Baron's guards. By hiding in the shadows of the crenellations, he was able to work his way to the keep undetected. Entering the keep was child's play for a thief of his caliber. However, a cunning lock with no less than 13 pins protected the private quarters of the Baron. Ravius broke only 9 lockpicks to open it. Using only a fork, a bit of string, and a wineskin, he disabled the 7 traps guarding the Baron's coin collection. Truly, Ravius was a master among thieves. With the coins safely in his grasp, Ravius began his escape, only to find the way blocked. The Baron had found the open door and was raising the guard to scour the castle. Ravius fled deeper into the castle, one step ahead of the questing guards. His only way out led through the boudoir of Baroness Veronique. He entered to find the lady preparing for bed. Now, it should be said at this point that Ravius was noted for his handsome looks, while the Baroness was noted for her plainness. Both of these facts were immediately recognized by each of the pair. "Doest thou come to plunder my virtue?" asked the lady, all a tremble. "Nay, fair lady," Ravius said, thinking quickly. "Plunder be a harsh term to apply upon such a delicate flower as your virtue." "I see thou hast made off with mine husband's precious coins." Ravius looked deeply into her eyes and saw the only path by which he would escape this night with his life. It would require a double sacrifice. "Though these coins are of rarest value, I have now found a treasure that is beyond all value," Ravius said smoothly. "Tell me, O beauteous one, why doest thy husband set 7 deadly traps around these tawdry coins, but only a simple lock upon the door of his virtuous wife?" "Ignace protects those things that are dearest to him," Veronique replied with ire. "I would give all the gold in my possession to spend but a moment basking in your radiance." With that, Ravius set down the coins he had worked so hard to steal. The Baroness swooned into his arms. When the captain of the guard asked to search her quarters, she hid Ravius most skillfully. She turned over the coins, claiming the thief dropped them when he fled out the window. With that sacrifice made, Ravius steeled himself for the second. He robbed the Lady Veronique of her virtue that night. He robbed her of it several times, lasting well into the wee hours of the morning. Exhausted yet sated, he stole away in the pre-dawn hours. My God, why you got so many fucking books? Trials of Saint Alicia, from the Trials of Saint Alicia. Akatosh made a covenant with Alicia in those days so long ago. He gathered the tangled skeins of Oblivion and knit them fast with the bloody sinews of his heart, and gave them to Alicia, saying, "This shall be my token to you. that so long as your blood and oath hold true, yet so shall my blood and oath be true to you. This token shall be the amulet of kings, and the covenant shall be made between us, for I am the king of spirits, and you are the queen of mortals. As you shall stand witness for all mortal flesh, so shall I stand witness for all immortal spirits. And Akatosh drew from his breast a burning handful of his heart's blood, and he gave it into Alicia's hand, saying, This shall also be a token to you of our joined blood and pledged faith. So long as you and your descendants shall wear the amulet of kings, then shall this dragon fire burn, an eternal flame, as a sign to all men and gods of our faithfulness. So long as the dragon fire shall burn, to you and to all generations, I swear that my heart's blood shall hold fast the gates of Oblivion. So long as the blood of the dragon runs strong in her rulers, the glory of the empire shall extend in unbroken years. But should the dragon fires fail, and should no heir of our joined blood wear the amulet of kings, then shall the empire descend into darkness, and the demon lords of misrule shall govern the land. From the Liturgy of the Rekindling of the Dragon Fires. Alright, so I'm almost certainly going to, I don't know how to read that without taking it. I'm almost certainly going to cut out the section of me reading, and it'll be its own. It wasn't what I had wanted for the first, like, interjection episode, but that one book was like 50 fucking pages long. So it's just what it's going to be. It's going to get its own standalone episode. Which does mean I now have no idea how long this episode is anymore. Because the recording's now an hour and 15 minutes long. I think I spent an hour reading. Probably cut, we'll go to Kvatch and meet Jauffre, and then we'll just wrap it there, maybe? I don't know. Okay. I guess this is technically this is part of the book reading episode, so I guess I might as well read this. A Short Life of Uriel Septim VII by Rufus Hain. 3rd Era 368 to 389. Strategist and Councillator. The early decades of Emperor Uriel's life were marked by aggressive expansion and consolidation of imperial influence throughout the empire. But especially in the east, in Morrowind and Blackmarsh, where the empire's power was limited, imperial culture was weak and native customs and traditions were strong and staunchly opposed to assimilation. During this period, Uriel greatly benefited from the arcane support and shrewd counsel of his close advisor, the imperial battle mage Jaeger Tharn. The story of Uriel's marriage to the princess Calavoria is a less happy tale. Though she was a beautiful and charming woman and greatly loved and admired by the people, the empress was a deeply unpleasant, arrogant, ambitious, grasping woman. She snared Uriel Septim with her feminine wiles, but Uriel Septim thereafter soon regretted his mistake and was repelled by her. They heartily detested one another and went out of their ways to hurt one another. Their children were the victims of this unhappy marriage. With his agile mind and vaunting ambition, Uriel soon outstripped his master in the balanced skills of threat and diplomacy. Diplomacy. Uriel's success in co-opting House Halalu as an advance guard of imperial culture and economic development in Morrowind is a noteworthy example. However, Uriel also grew in pride and self-assurance. Jaeger Tharn fed Uriel's pride, and hiding behind the mask of an outpaced former master counselor, Tharn purchased the complete trust that led finally to Uriel's betrayal and imprisonment in Oblivion, and Tharn's secret usurpation of the imperial throne. 3rd Era 389 to 399. Betrayed and imprisoned. Little is known of Uriel's experience while trapped in Oblivion. He says he remembers nothing but an endless sequence of waking and sleeping nightmares. He says he believed himself to be dreaming and had no notion of passage of time. Publicly, he long claimed to have no memory of the dreams and nightmares of his imprisonment, but from time to time, during the interviews with the emperor that formed the basis of this biography, he would relate details of nightmares he had, and would describe them as similar to the nightmares he had when he was imprisoned in Oblivion. He seemed not so much unwilling as incapable of describing the experience. But it is clear that the experience changed him. In Third Era 389, he was a young man, full of pride, energy, and ambition. During the Restoration, after his rescue and return to the throne, he was an old man, grave, patient, and cautious. He also became conservative and pessimistic, where the policies of his early life were markedly bold, even rash. Uriel accounts for this change as a reaction to and a revulsion for the early teachings and counsel of Jaeger Thorn. However, Uriel's exile in Oblivion also clearly drained and wasted him in body and spirit, though his mind retained the shrewd cunning and flexibility of his youth. The story of Thorn's magical impersonation of the Emperor, the unmasking of Thorn's imposture by Queen Berenzia, and the roles played by King Edwire, Rhea Silmain, and her champion in assembling the Staff of Chaos, defeating the renegade Imperial battle mage Jaeger Thorn, and restoring Uriel to the throne, is treated at length in Stern Gamboge's excellent 3-volume biography of Berenzia. There is no reason to recount that narrative here. Summarized briefly, Jaeger Thorn's neglect and mismanagement of imperial affairs resulted in a steady decline in the empire's economic prosperity, allowed many petty lords and kings to challenge the authority of the empire, and permitted strong local rulers in the east and west to indulge in open warfare over lands and sovereign rights. Third Era 399 to 415. Restoration, the Miracle of Peace, and Vardenfell. During the Restoration, Uriel's septum turned from the aggressive campaign of military intimidation and diplomatic accommodation of his earlier years, and relied instead on clandestine manipulation of affairs behind the scenes, primarily through the agencies of the various branches of the Blades. A complete assessment of the methods and objectives of this period must wait until after the Emperor's death, when the voluminous diaries archived at his country estate may be opened to the public, and when the Blades no longer need to maintain secrecy to protect the identities of its agents. Two signal achievements of this period point to the efficacy of Uriel's subtle policies. The Miracle of Peace, also popularly known as the Warp in the West, that transformed the Iliac Bay region from an unruly assortment of warring petty kingdoms into the well-ordered and peaceful modern counties of Hammerfell, Sentinel, Wayrest, and Orsinium, and the colonization of Vardenfell, presided over by the skillful machinations of King Helseth of Morrowind and Lady Berenzia, the Queen Mother, which brought Morrowind more closely into the sphere of imperial influence. Third Era, 415 to 430. The Golden Peace, King Helseth's court, and the Nine in the East. Following the Miracle of Peace, best described in Per Vetterson's Daggerfall, A Modern History, the Empire entered a period of peace and prosperity comparable to the early years of Uriel's reign. With the imperial heartland and west solidly integrated into the Empire, Uriel was able to turn his full attention to the east, to Morrowind. Exploiting conflicts at the heart of Morrowind's monolithic tribunal religion and the long-established Great House system of government, and taking advantage of the terrible threat that the corrupted divine beings at the heart of the tribunal religion presented to the growing colonies of Vardenfell, Uriel worked through the shadowy agents of the Blades and through the court of King Helseth in Mournhold to shift the center of political power in Morrowind from the Great House councils to Helseth's court, and took advantage of the collapse of the orthodox tribunal cults to establish the Nine Divines as the dominant face in Hlaalu and Vardenfell districts. Hasfet Antabolus's treatment of the establishment of the Nine in the East in his 4-volume Life and Times of the Nerevarine is comprehensive. However, he fails to resolve the central mystery of this period. How much did Uriel know about the prophecies of the Nerevarine? And how did he learn of their significance? The definitive resolution of this and other mysteries must await in the future release of the Emperor's private papers, or a relenting of the Blades' strict policies of secrecy concerning their agents. The Black Horse Courier, Special Edition, Emperor and Heirs Assassinated. Elder Council named as regents. Emperor Uriel Septim VII is dead at the age of 87, having ruled Tamriel for 65 years. He was killed by assassins unknown. At the same time, in separate locations, the late Emperor's 3 sons and heirs, Crown Prince Geldal, 56, Prince Inman, 55, Prince Ebel, 53, were slain by other assassins. An investigation into the identity and motives of the assassins is underway, but the Elder Council, Imperial Guard, and Blades Guard have forbidden the publication of reports and rumors concerning the event until further notice. By ancient precedent, the Elder Council rules the Empire until a new emperor is crowned. No direct heirs survive, and the Council has proposed no list of candidates. Chancellor Okado, Imperial Battle Mage, speaking for the Elder Council, presented an appeal to the Empire's citizens for calm and asked that the people remember the Emperor, his sons, and the Elder Council in their prayers. Emperor Uriel's early reign was marked by peace and prosperity. The Empress Calavoria bore him 3 healthy sons, was a loving companion to the Emperor, and a great favorite of the people. However, the Emperor and the Empire suffered terribly during the Imperial Simulacrum, 3rd Era 389 to 399, when he was held captive in Oblivion, while the usurper Jaeger Tharn assumed his appearance and ruled in his stead. Emperor Uriel was finally rescued and restored, and the impostors defeated by the agency of the sorceress Rhea Silmaine and her shadowy protege, but the affairs of the Empire were in great disorder, and Empress Calavoria, exhausted by her ordeal, withdrew from public life. The decades following the Restoration were once again peaceful and prosperous, but increasing political tensions among the petty states of northwest Tamriel finally erupted in the Wars of the Iliac Bays, resulting in the establishment of the modern borders of Daggerfall, Sentinel, Wayrest, and Orsinium, and culminating with the remarkable events associated with the Warp in the West. The latter years of the Emperor's reign have seen a flourishing of imperial influence in the provinces, and with the fortunate resolution of the religious wars and the Vardenfell crisis, and with the wise and firm guidance of King Helseth and his mother, Queen Berenzia, an extension of high imperial culture even into the more remote parts of Morrowind. The Emperor's murder and the murder of his 3 sons is a terrible crime and a great tragedy for the Empire. Battlemage Okado assures us that all the resources of the Elder Council, the Legion, the Guard, the Arcane University, and the Imperial Battle College are being employed to bring the assassins to justice. But in the meantime, the greatest tribute we citizens can offer to the memory of our beloved Emperor is to go earnestly and diligently about our daily affairs, honoring the life of the great Empire he loved so much and served so faithfully for so long. Mother, I know you're upset, but please, I have important duties here at the Priory, and I can't come to the Imperial City and babysit you. Just stay calm, like Chancellor Okado says, and pray for the Emperor and his sons. Oh, fuck, they're all different. Okay. Mother, what do you expect me to do about it? Come to the city, track down the assassins, and bring them to justice myself? And are there assassins banging on your door? Do you have some reason to think they're coming for you next? Please don't panic. These assassinations have upset everyone, but you just have to go on with your life. I don't know what you're worried about. Everything is fine here. Everyone's getting on with business. Like the Chancellor says, the Elder Council has everything under control. Certainly you don't expect me to... Mother, good gods, don't go crazy on me. You'd think the streets of the Imperial City were filled with rioters and the legions were being called out to restore order. We've had no disturbances at all here in Coral, and I've heard of nothing at all in the city or in the other towns. People are doing just as Chancellor Okado said, staying calm and honoring the memory of the Emperor and his sons by getting along with their lives. Running around like frightened children isn't going to help anyone. I haven't got time to... Mother, please don't worry. The Elder Council knows what it is doing. Uriel was an old man. They knew he wouldn't live forever, and I'm sure they had plans for the succession. Of course, now with the 3 princes dead, it's not clear who will be the next emperor, but it's happened before. There are precedents, I'm sure. And anyway, Okado and the council had been running the empire for the past 15 years anyway. Nothing to worry about. Everything will be fine. I don't know what you've read or heard, but here at the Priory, everyone seems to think it must have been madmen or witches or crazy cultists. It doesn't look at all political. It's horrible and depressing, but the Empire will survive. There will not be rioting or civil war or another warp in the West. So please, if you like, go stay with Uncle Cor and Aunt Hara on the farm for a while. But I'm certain you'll be perfectly safe in the city. I'll try to get down to visit as soon as possible, and I hope to hear from you soon. Your loving son, Heiner.
Well met.
I didn't read nothing, Piner.
Hello.
It's
All
good
right.
to know we've got such a strong Fighters Guild presence here in town.
Of course.
Alright, so after
The
that...
Emperor and his 3 sons dead, right under the noses of the Imperial Guard. It's a disgrace.
Alright, so after I was putting the finishing touches on the book reading video, I realized that not only did I forget to do an intro, which you saw outside the Oblivion gate, but I also forgot to do an outro, which you're now getting here from the main menu, because I am a mess. I hope you enjoyed my my readings. If you did, please let me know, and I will continue to do these little spin-off side videos where I delve deeper into the lore of the world, on top of the side videos I plan to do to delve deeper into the lore of our fearless protagonist, Theodyn. So yeah, let me know if you want to see more of this. I had a lot of fun reading. I enjoy lore and world building a lot, so I am on board for whatever you guys would like to see. So yeah, like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you want. And until next time, YouTube, I love you. And bye-bye.